everyone. You're listening to The Future of Food Is You, a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Abena Anim-Somuah, and each week I talk to emerging talents in the food world, and they share what they're up to, as well as their dreams and predictions for what's ahead. I love this new generation of chefs, bakers, and creatives making their way in the worlds of food, drink, media, and tech. Today's guest is Stephanie Lau, the New York City-based content creator behind the monthly gathering known as Cookbook Club. Stephanie started hosting this at her one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn and has grown the gatherings to more than 100 attendees. I love diving deep into the world of cookbooks with Stephanie, hearing about her upbringing with foodie parents, her process for selecting cookbooks for her club, and how she balances working a full-time job and her content creation hustle. Stay tuned for our chat. If you're an aspiring magazine collector, you need to check out Cherry Bomb. Each issue is thick and lush and celebrates women and culinary creatives via gorgeous photography and great stories and recipes. Whether you collect magazines, read them and pass them along to your friends, or cut them up for your vision boards or collages, you'll love Cherry Bomb. You can find Cherry Bomb wherever indie magazines are sold. Places like Soho News International in New York City and McNally Jackson Books in Brooklyn, or visit cherrybomb.com to order an issue today. Now let's check in with today's guest. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us on the Future of Food Is You podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here.
Can you tell us where you grew up and how did food show up in your life?
I grew up in Toronto, specifically East Scarborough.
Nice. Fellow Canadian.
Yeah. Where I grew up had a really big impact on my relationship with food. So my parents, I think they're like the first foodies before being a foodie was a thing.
Ooh, okay.
They love eating. They love discovering new restaurants. They love trying new recipes. I think that played a huge part in how I grew up and I guess eventually how I see food now. I just remember on the weekends we would go out for dim sum in Markham. When I was growing up and like going to school, there was Warden Station. They always sold Jamaican patties. And that was my favorite after-school snack.
Yeah.
And I think because of the diversity in Scarborough, that really was like, okay, there's so much to explore. That's just how I grew up, cooking a lot, going out to eat with my parents. And they weren't just cooking Chinese food. They were cooking Indian curries. And my mom she loved reading the New York Times, cutting out the recipes.
Yes.
And she has this binder that she keeps in the basement. I don't think she ever looks at it. But I just remember this one recipe she told my dad to make. And it was pernil, which is a pork dish, like pulled pork, super tasty. And he made it so much almost every weekend. And we got so sick of it that I don't think I ever want to eat pernil ever again. But it was such an experience.
Oh, my God. I grew up not too far from you, but I was a peak Food Network family channel. I feel like the channels were close.
Yeah. It was like 52 and 48.
Yes, literally. I'm just like scrolling through and I just would always watch like Family Channel and then feel a little grown and go watch Barefoot Contessa or Guy Fieri. And then we got really good Food Network Canada shows like You Gotta Eat Here. Come Dine With Me Canada.
Oh my God, Come Dine With Me.
I know.
I really want to do a Come Dine With Me. I think that'd be so fun.
Can I please come? Like, we have to make this happen.
I will send you the invite.
Amazing. And it's so interesting what you say about Toronto too. I feel like I've lived in Toronto a good amount as an adult, but there's something really special about the accessibility to diversity where it's like Jamaican patties as common as really good dim sum or, you know, like jollof or wache or like all these other dishes. So it's really cool that you got to experience that so early. It sounds like you grew up in a cooking forward household, but did you grow up in a cookbook forward household where like cookbooks a big part of your parents' collection?
I would say yes and no. Like we have a lot of cookbooks, but we didn't use them. My dad mostly cooked food from his own childhood, stuff that his mom and his grandmother taught him. And then my mom was the cookbook person.
Oh, nice.
But she was the one collecting them and then not using them.
Yeah.
So I think whenever she decided to cook, which was not as often as my dad, then she would use a cookbook. So I didn't really find myself really referencing cookbooks. It was more like picture books. I never really used them until now, I guess, as an adult.
If you think, you know, if you're in your parents' house right now, are there like 2 or 3 where you're like, I remember that one, pulling that one out and that evoking an emotion?
Yeah, definitely. It was big and red and yellow. How to Cook Everything by Mark Bittman.
Yes, that's the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. And then Joy of Cooking and Mrs. Field's Cookie Cookbook. That's definitely one that we actually use. That was like what you bring out at Christmas to give cookie boxes to all your friends and fam.
I feel like everyone had a kitschy cookbook. Like I remember having like an American Girl cookbook or something of that sort. But yeah, the other two you mentioned are just like, those are core reference books. Everyone from home cooks to chefs use them. So wow, that's really awesome. You have a very beautiful Instagram with lots of exciting photos and just have this like really awesome appreciation for food. How would you describe your current cooking style?
I guess it really depends on the day. Right now, it's survival/protein, bro. So I'm trying to like eat a lot of protein. I guess that means like a lot of eggs, a lot of fish, a lot of chicken, but then make that taste good. So I'm not just eating chicken and broccoli. I guess a good example is a chicken and broccoli bowl, but it would have jerk sauce on it. And then the rice would be rice and peas. So there's like coconut milk. And then it just tastes better. But then I would say also that when I have more time and I'm not so focused on those kinds of goals, it's more exploratory. So I think either I want to look at things that my grandma used to make. I'll be like, oh, I'm craving this thing. How do I make it? And then I'll start looking into it and deep diving on the internet on like how to make hagao, which is a Chinese shrimp dumpling.
Those are the best.
Yeah, but they're like super difficult to make. And after trying to make it, I don't ever want to make it again. I just want to go to a restaurant and eat it.
Yeah, it's like the thing with croissants, right? You do one weekend project of croissants, you're like, I respect the $7 I'm paying now.
Exactly. So I like to do difficult cooking projects. I had like a pasta phase, a sourdough phase.
Yeah, all during the pandemic or?
Yeah, during the pandemic. I haven't done it in a while, but there's always something that I'm just like, oh, I really want to do this thing and deep dive into this specific area of food.
I have to ask, since you're such a avid cook, what are 3 sauces and condiments you can't live without right now?
Ooh, I mean, a chili crisp, a good chili crisp. Right now I'm really liking From Paro Tarka. I guess because it has ghee in it, which makes it a little bit more buttery. Ketchup. Any ketchup is delicious. And just like mixing it with mayo and putting it on a sandwich.
Nice. And ketchup's a good base, if you're making okonomiyaki sauce, cocktail sauce, a lot of different things.
Shrimp cocktail is classic for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
And what's your last one?
Kewpie mayo.
Mother of all mayos.
Yeah.
That's a good transition into, you're an online cook content creator. Are there any 3 CPG products you're really excited about right now?
Yes. So one of them, general category, is protein ramen. I think ramen is like traditionally...
Like
Immi Eats.
Yeah, Kevin Lee. He's a friend of mine. That's really cool. Yeah.
The aspect of having some protein in it to make it more nutritionally dense is very appealing to me. I also love the idea of chickens and fish that are, I guess, like lab grown. I haven't tried any of it yet, but I'm so curious about those kinds of things.
Like the Beyond Meat, because I think Beyond Meat just stuck with beef, but now they're transitioning to other products.
Yeah. So I'd be curious to try something like that. That makes me really excited. Last one, Oishi Berry. And Oishi, what they're doing, because they came out with a tomato recently.
Yes, I've heard.
The idea of having a perfect tomato all year round is very exciting.
Yeah, that's so cool. You're a full-time CPA, which you're a certified accountant, but cooking is just such a big passion of you. It's almost like your part-time thing in a way. When did you get started creating content, and was it always with food?
Yeah, I started creating content when I was in university, but it wasn't food. I used to have a beauty blog. It was before Instagram. I did a lot of nail art and Halloween makeup looks in general. I would review different beauty products. So when Instagram came around, I started sharing on Instagram, and then it was my first taste of doing partnerships with brands. So I actually had a partnership with Sally Hansen, and I was doing nail art.
Fun.
Yeah,
that's really
cool. But
yeah.
then I kind of fell out of love with it. I found it very consumeristic. I still love skincare and beauty and makeup. I guess when the pandemic hit and when I moved to San Francisco, like in 2019, I became more into food because I was just cooking more.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I'm just used to sharing stuff. Like, what do I want to share now? And naturally, I think I just started taking pictures of what I was eating.
Something I love about your work is you hold this reverence to lunch. I make this joke all the time about eating lunch al desco, just piling stuff into a plate and calling it a day just to fill me up. But you seem to have this beautiful reverence for, these really crafty toasts or really beautifully designed rice bowls. Why is lunch so important to you in that regard?
I work from home all days of the week.
Nice.
So 100% of the time. I might go in the office now and again, but I mostly work from home. I go to the gym early in the morning. I work a little bit.
Mm.
My team works West Coast. So my morning
okay.
is my time.
Yeah.
My morning is my time to like make something that is a little bit more involved.
Mm-hmm.
And the lighting is also much better in the morning. That's like
Practical
a very like
and
Instagram-y thing.
emotional. I love it.
That is why lunch is so important to me. I find myself working quite late into the night.
Mm-hmm.
And dinner time just has less importance to me
It's
because
the
of
inverse
that.
for you.
Yeah. So
Nice.
lunch is my time, perfect lighting. I can spend time, I don't know, perfecting like the checkerboard on a toast.
Yeah, which you'll have
Um,
to teach me. It always kind of like droops into one gloopy mess at the end.
You need a knife and the right texture of
Yeah.
things.
It's so awesome that you have this appreciation for food, community, family, and now it's manifested in one of your biggest part-time projects. So you've been hosting these cooking clubs around the city.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really exciting. You've had a little bit of buzz. A lot of people are going to them. You start to grow out of your space. Can you tell us the concept of how Cookbook Club came to be? And is that just the name, Cookbook Club?
Yeah, I am toying with the idea of some other names because
Nice.
someone called it Steph Lau Cookbook Club, and I
Ooh,
was just like, that's a lot for me.
That's regal.
I don't want my name necessarily attached to it.
Sure.
I like the idea of other people taking the lead
Yeah.
and being able to host it as well.
Mhm.
So I have some other ideas in mind, but I'll see those come to fruition maybe in the next couple months.
Yeah.
But
Very
anyway,
cool.
so starting Cookbook Club, it's an idea that has existed long before my own time. I came
Mhm.
across it when I was on Bumble BFF when I had first moved to New York.
So cute. Wait, you should get Bumble BFF to sponsor one.
I should.
Well-
That's a great idea. I'll
have our
take that into consideration.
Yeah.
Bumble BFF, I came across someone's profile who was like, "Oh, I'm looking for people to join my cookbook club," and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is perfect for me."
Wait, that's so sweet.
They
Oh my
never
gosh.
replied to me.
Oh, that's okay. Well, now you
Yeah.
have other BFFs who come to your cookbook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was just this idea. I guess it was just like something at the back of my mind. And a year later, I was like, okay, I have all these books. What do I do with them? I like to use them myself, but there's no way I'm going to go through it in my lifetime. I received a bunch of books maybe at the end of December last year. And I was like, okay, is anyone interested in joining a cookbook club? Now I just want to do it
Yeah.
at this point. And I got a lot of feedback from friends and then also people who follow me on Instagram. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it now. How do I get started? I think I want to do it in my apartment. And I was like, okay, how many people can I fit in my apartment? I have a dining table for 4 people. I have a desk that I work from, but I can move my laptop. And then I was like, okay, that's like 8 or 10 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I get to 20? Buy nothing groups on Facebook. There's this sweet old lady that let me use her foldable table. Yeah, I walked a couple blocks to pick it up. And then I just borrowed chairs from neighbors. And then I chose a cookbook, which was Tender Heart.
Yes, by Hetty McKinnon.
By Hetty McKinnon.
We love Hetty here at Cherry Bomb.
I thought it was good because it's very approachable. There's so many, I guess, vegetables. So you can choose what you like, and then you can kind of like just dive into the recipe almost immediately. All of the ingredients in the cookbook are super easy to find if they're in season. It's vegetarian forward.
Yeah.
So that made it easy for me. Like, I don't have to worry about food restrictions so much.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that because it's nice to have a vegetarian forward book because then you can almost like add protein if need be versus like if a book is more omnivore forward, then it's like you really have to think about the substitutions and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, very
Exactly.
smart. Really
So,
cool.
yeah, it turned out so well. I invited friends and friends of friends just because it's my own apartment.
Yeah.
After I started sharing it on Instagram, I got so many people like, oh my God, how do I join this? Can I come to the next one?
Wow.
I was like, well, I guess I can't do it in my apartment anymore. I want everybody to be able to come. I just like the idea of meeting new people through food and through Instagram. And obviously, if I have more than 20 people come, I can try more than 20 recipes in the cookbook. There was someone who had attended the first cookbook club who was a friend of a friend, and she did the bookings for the Knife Factory.
Ooh.
And
yeah.
she's like, oh, let me speak to the owner
Yeah,
and
that's a
see how I can
space out
connect you.
in Bushwick,
in
yeah.
East Williamsburg,
East
actually.
Williamsburg. Got it.
They were willing to let me use the space. And I think their capacity is 100, but I was like, okay, let me see how I can deal with 50 people.
Going from 20 to 100 is a lot.
Yeah. I was not ready for that.
Yeah, totally.
That's like full-on event planning job. It's something that brings me joy, but I also don't want to put additional stress on myself that is like completely unwarranted. That's why I was like, okay, 50. Let me try 50 and see what happens.
Yeah.
There's a lot more interest than 50. So first I invited people who I knew already as well. And then the rest of the spots were for people who were just in the community and interested in coming. I picked Natasha Pickowicz more than Kate. I think something that was really important was making sure that, I guess, people enjoyed themselves. There's a lot of small details. cutlery, plates, flowers. I have a friend who owns a vintage plate store. Her Instagram is Vessel Market, and I rented some stuff from her.
Cool.
And she was also attending, and she was so kind as to not just bring the pieces that I rented, but also a luggage full of these beautiful vintage plates.
Wow.
And so when people came, she was helping them to plate their dishes and choose like the correct dish for their recipe.
Yeah.
And so it just ended up being this beautiful spread of cakes and jellies and cookies. And I was like, well, I'm so amazed at what people can do when they just want to eat something beautiful.
I want to talk about, you have a lot of guests who probably have different cooking skills. I'm sure there are people like you who are incredibly skilled,
I'm not
meticulous.
I'm just always figuring things out.
No, I love that. But you're skilled at figuring it out. Let's say that. Who are meticulous. And then, you probably have like your regular avid eater, not so skilled baker. How do you think about supporting the different types of levels of home cooks that come and participate?
Right. Generally, I'm picking books that have a range of difficulty in the recipes. I'll skim through a book before I'm like, okay, this is the book that I want to do. I've had a couple people be like, oh, like I'm not really a baker. Which recipe can I bake from more than cake? There's a couple recipes that don't require any baking at all. And I can pinpoint which ones are good for them and which ones are not. I don't have any additional support for people who are not necessarily wanting to figure things out last minute on how to pick a recipe. But maybe in the future, that is something that I can definitely think about.
Nice. You've had your 50-person event, and then you just had another event at Honey's for Dishoom Cookbook, which again, really awesome. You also seem to have this pattern of like really supporting cookbook authors of color, which I really appreciate.
I think it's just how I like to eat, to be honest.
Respect.
Yeah. I'm just like, oh, I wish Dishoom was in New York City, and it's not, so let me just bring it here.
I love that a lot. That's really cool. Maybe there's a franchising opportunity there somewhere. But can people come to the Cookbook Club if they don't cook? Like, can, let's say, someone pay or experience? I'm curious how you're thinking about that.
So I've had people ask, like, oh, can I bring my brother or my sister or my roommate? And I say only if they bring something to eat, specifically from the cookbook. I think right now, just because of the capacity constraints, I think you're probably going to come to one of these things if you're really into cooking and eating. And there are some easy recipes as well, like we were saying. If they really want, they can just cook. Like the slaw in the Dishoom cookbook is very, very easy. It's just cutting up some cabbage and making a jam. I think I want to encourage people to just try to cook, even if they don't feel super confident, because I think cookbooks are a way to learn about food, learn how to cook. So right now, we're not really accepting people who are not cooking. You can just go to a restaurant for that.
I wanted to ask about the access of cookbooks. Again, cookbooks are incredibly expensive, and sometimes, the traditional ways of borrowing a book, like going to the library and stuff, aren't something people think about. How do you make sure that, recipes to the cookbook are accessible, but still also honoring the process of, like, cherishing the book?
I know for a fact that not everybody owns the cookbooks that I'm picking, but luckily when these authors are trying to promote their cookbooks, there's, like, a plethora of recipes that they'll put in the New York Times, that they'll just publish on their own websites. Sometimes they'll have a newsletter where they're already sharing the recipes for free. I think there are a lot of free resources. And then Libby is a great, great resource. If you're part of the New York or Brooklyn public library system, you can just access it automatically.
Yeah, and on any device too, like Kindle, computer.
Exactly. It makes it accessible because those things are available. But if they weren't, I think that would make Cookbook Club very difficult.
I want to talk to you about the space, because one thing about New York is we have lots of people, but not a lot of space. And for your last Cookbook Club, which again, you hosted, Dishoom was the theme, which is the Indian restaurant in London. Very, very great place. You partnered with Honey's, which is a restaurant in Bushwick. Why did you decide to partner with the restaurant when it came to the space aspect of this club?
Right. A key thing is cost for me, because I'm not like making any money from Cookbook Clubs. I'm collecting $5 from everybody. So 50 people, $5, $250. Venues are really expensive in New York. Anywhere that is open to partnering with me that has a large space. Honey's is like, they have like a fermentation/winery. It's called Enlightenment Wines. They have like these big picnic tables. I think their capacity was more than 50 people, but 50 people again was just like what was comfortable for me. In exchange, it was basically just like, suggest that people buy some drinks because we're using this space.
Yeah, okay. So Honey's gave you the space at no cost.
So I rented the flatware. and paid for a dishwasher.
Okay.
And that's
nice.
what that $250 basically covered.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then there's some like other miscellaneous things.
Yeah.
But
That's pretty generous for them to be able to.
yeah. It goes in hand with like supporting Honeys because it's a local business in the area. And then also just like having a space that is accessible, that's not so expensive that people can't attend. Because I don't want to charge like $20 for someone to cook a dish.
And also make food.
And then, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. And I mean, shout out to Honeys. Well, let's actually talk about, the cookbooks that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it sounds like you're just an avid cookbook collector yourself, and now you're kind of creating a community as an extension of the cookbooks. What are your thoughts now on the current landscape of the cookbook world?
I think it's super oversaturated, which is a good thing and a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of places that you can get recipes from, right? It's not just cookbooks.
Yeah.
Unless you're really tied to like a specific story or author or culture, then you're probably not going to buy a cookbook because you can just find it elsewhere. I mean, I love cookbooks because I like having a physical, I don't know, it's like memorabilia,
Yeah.
a little collection.
Yeah.
There's just so many out there. Nobody's really like rating cookbooks or telling me which ones are good. Yeah, I can like go to the New York Times best 10 cookbooks of the year, but it doesn't give me enough. I'm just like, what's the skill level? Are there going to be ingredients that I can't find?
Yeah.
Is it in milliliters or cups?
Yeah,
Like,
metric or imperial.
I want to know all this information, but
Yeah.
there's not really a space for me to find those things.
It's almost like someone needs Wirecutter for cookbooks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like honest reviews.
I think the good thing about the oversaturation is that there's something for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you don't know how to cook, there's like a book that I have. It's called Saucy. And it's like, if you love sauce and you just want to learn how to make a few more sauces, here's 100 sauces that you can make.
Oh, I need
at
this
home.
book. Okay.
Yeah, and then things like, I don't know how to cook everything, right? Like,
yeah, reference books.
Yeah, more reference books.
Yeah,
and then restaurant books.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of like visiting a restaurant in another country, getting a book as a souvenir, and then cooking out of that book.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear, since you're really cooking out of cookbooks and really also getting people to get excited about cooking from cookbooks, how do you think this role will help you in terms of relaying information or insights to those in the cookbook industry, whether it's publishing houses, editors, or cookbook authors?
Right. I think being those people in this space is really scary because just the nature of media is so ephemeral. You're just scrolling past things constantly. How do you get people's attention? Really what people are following is a story. That's so, so important. Like if I can relate to your story or I want to learn more about you through a cookbook, then I'm probably going to buy it. That's the sale for me. I don't know. It's like a storybook rather than an actual cookbook. You need a mix of both. I think reference cookbooks, I don't really see as many of them anymore, or maybe they're just not being sold to me. But I think there is definitely a market for it. But you can chat GPT, how do I make this? And chat GPT will tell you.
Since right now it's just you working on it, do you think there's another way for you to bring other players in the food space to help co-host or offer some sort of insights based on what they're working on?
I'm really open to working with publishers. I've had publishers reach out to me and say like, oh, this book is coming out. Are you interested in doing it for Cookbook Club? And I guess my response to that is I would love for publishers to be able to support. It's almost like a paid ad, right? If I'm doing it. So unless there's some like real support, I'd love to pay for a photographer. I'd love to get a space where I'm not just bartering. So I think any monetary support would be amazing and like to partner in that way.
Yeah.
Also open to doing something like a Cookbook Club market where there's, I don't know, a sponsor that is sharing a new product. It could be like a drink.
Yeah.
And because people who are coming to Cookbook Clubs are very into food and like buying these cool new CPG products, I'd love to just have this in the space so that people can experience this. There's so many things that Cookbook Club can become. And I think there's a lot of ways that businesses can get involved.
Definitely.
Those things haven't come into fruition yet, but I am open to anything.
I also want to say this because I think a lot of guests and listeners who come on our show are still in the figuring it out era. I think our society has this, almost like perception of once something's out in the world, it has to be fully baked. But I think there's a beauty of coming at it half-baked. Like you've had 3 Cookbook Club parties so far. I'm sure they're 3 different parties in terms of your growth.
Oh, yeah, they're completely different. I think the skill set that I'm almost building is like very project management, events management, which I do use at work. But then also it's very strange to like apply these things to something that's completely different. That brings me a lot of joy.
So now that you've had 3 cookbook clubs under your belt, your second cookbook club, the More Than Cake one, had a bit of a viral moment. You were featured on Good Morning America. Congratulations. That's
Thank
really
you.
exciting.
So unexpected.
Is there a motivation or a desire to take cookbook clubs outside to other cities or other places?
I would love to. I think if I was visiting another city, I'd be so open to hosting one somewhere else. San Francisco, I still have friends there. I know there's a lot of interest there. Bigger cities like London. If I was traveling somewhere, I'd love to just host a cookbook club. I don't know what that would look like necessarily, but I'm open to it.
Amazing. Well, we are huge manifestors on the podcast. So if someone is listening in any of the cities and,
someone can fly me out to London.
Yes.
I'll do a Dishoom Cookbook Club there too.
A part 2. Yeah, that's really awesome. I know you're still thinking about different cookbooks, but is there a dream attendee or partner that you would love to be a part of the club?
Yeah, so I definitely think about what I aspire for Cookbook Club. And I think something that would be really fun is there's a Don Angie cookbook.
Yes.
How crazy would it be to have a Don Angie cookbook club in Don Angie, after hours? Obviously, I don't know how that would work. I think that would be so cool. Or a Winston Bakery, Winston cookbook kind of deal, at the actual location. I think that would be super cool.
You have a full-time job as a CPA. You work at a tech company, but you're also really incredibly passionate about food. And I remember even the first time we met, I was like, oh, maybe she's just a food person. What is the relationship to your work in terms of your full-time job and then also noticing that this side hustle, passion, hobby is becoming more legitimate?
Right. It's important to have this idea of having balance in your life. And I think it's the Japanese concept of ikigai, where it's something that you do that brings you joy or that you're passionate about, something that keeps you healthy and something that makes you money. And when those things interconnect, then you've found purpose in life, which sounds kind of cheesy, but I think food definitely can be that for me, but it's definitely not a money thing for me. Oh, there is some money associated with it, but I think that's just a nice to have. So my 9 to 7, 9 to 8, 9 to 9 focus is definitely my full-time career. But I love food so much that I always make time for it, whatever time I can to make myself a lunch, for example. And then these cookbook clubs, I think they bring me so much connection. And so it's really important that even if I am doing this thing that is going to make me money, that these other things, I think they bring so much opportunity. And whether that's money or other things, I think those things are really, really valuable. And it's important to put time into those things.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love the part you said, you just love food so much that you'll make time for it no matter what.
And I think other people see how passionate that people can be. And it kind of just turns into something you don't expect necessarily. And I think that's really what keeps me doing it.
Yeah, I'm actually getting emotional. That's just so beautiful. Well, again, a lot of our listeners on the show are figuring out, I get so many DMs from, listeners being like, I really want to do this food thing, but I have to pay the bills, life's in the way, there's different circumstances. Do you have any advice for someone who's in a similar position to you, who has a full-time job that they're good at and they know is important to them, but also really wants to pursue food with more depth and more detail?
Just do it. Make time for it. If you really want to explore something, then I think that maybe an hour every day, be consistent. Consistency is key. Spend time learning or reading or talking to people who already do it. I have tons of friends who have now quit their jobs, full-time jobs, and have gone into food entirely. And I'm so proud of them because I'm that's a big risk, but also they're so happy. I guess they're doing what sometimes I see as their one true calling. And I'm just I'm so glad that you're not doing that job that wasn't making you happy before. I think if you just do it, I think everything else will kind of follow. And if you love it, then you'll continue to do it. And if you don't, you won't, right? You just have to make time for it. I know there are only so many hours in the day, but if you really want something, you can carve out a little time.
Yeah, no, that's so profound. I can tell. I've seen friends, I've experienced burnout on several occasions now. I think I'm still recovering, even though I'm far removed from those jobs. But to be able to really think about your work and maintain passion and do something that you love without having it be your means of living and not get burnt out, it's very, very complicated. So I really commend you for just, it seems like you have really thought about how you want both of these things to exist. Yeah. And I've been really rooting for the homies who've, taken the lead.
I think everybody should have a creative hobby. It's just a different skill set, a different mindset, a different space in my brain and my heart as well. It's a complicated relationship.
Totally.
Because I think that once you try and monetize your hobbies, it almost makes it an obligation and then you don't really want to do it anymore. Because I have a full-time job, it makes it easy for me to step away when I feel like I'm almost like getting burnt out from my creative hobby, which is crazy. Yeah, but at the point when it's not my release, I need to like take a step back and be like, okay. But if that was my full-time job, I'd be so afraid.
Yeah, because again, you've also spent so much of your life connected to it in like a emotional way. Versus, I'm sure like you're an accountant, like you probably in university, you're like I know what I have to do. Even taking your CPA exam, like that's a whole process. So to almost like take something that you've gone to not have any stakes attached to, and then be like, this is how I live. This is how I make my money. Like,
right.
If it's a different ball game. So, well, I have to ask, like, are there any aspirations to go into food full time, or are you still kind of liking the two-life duality?
Balance is like a work in progress for me. I think about being in food full time. Definitely not in production. Like, I wouldn't open my own restaurant kind of thing. I love the idea of being more like event planning, community events, and content creation. I also toyed with the idea of going back to school. I would love to study something like nutrition.
Yeah.
I know people say that going to culinary school is like useless. It's all about experience. I think I would appreciate the experience just to learn more, but not to go and work in a restaurant, just like for my own knowledge.
How do you think your role in the food world now will inspire people who are still trying to figure out how they fit in or not?
I think there's space for everybody in so many different ways. And I think the way that I'm in this space right now, it's changed so much, right? Like, I wasn't hosting cookbook clubs up until the beginning of this year. And before that, for like 3-4 years, I was creating content, both casually and also for brands. And so it can be anything you want it to be. I think you just have to be open to it, right? Yeah. Because, I don't know, like, cookbook clubs are not a new concept. But I think what cookbook clubs could be can really change, because when's the last time you were able to try all these things from a cookbook? I think there's not a lot of longevity to cookbooks necessarily because of the ephemeral nature of media in general. Yeah, I think I want to play a part in, I guess, making things accessible to people. Like, oh, there's this cookbook. It's by this restaurant. It might not seem approachable, but let's do a cookbook club and just regular, everyday people can cook from it. Yeah.
I think that's a really beautiful perspective of wanting to create things rooted in sustainability and community. We're all online. We're always going to be online, but I think this is almost like a salve to the jadedness and the frustrations that often come with just like knowing everything and having so much access to content. So
yeah, it's scary because there's so much, and like I just rot in my bed, like scrolling.
We all do.
And I'm just like, I need to get out of this. And part of Cookbook Club is literally just not rotting.
Well, Stephanie, this was such an incredible conversation. I learned so much, and I'm so excited to come to my Cookbook Club. And I hope that our listeners and people in our community get to experience cookbook clubs with you. And I'm just so excited for your future in the food world.
Yeah. Cookbook club is for everybody.
I love that. Well, only if you bring something.
Yeah, only if you bring something. Only if you're actually cooking from the cookbook.
If we want to continue to support you, where are the best places to find you?
Just on Instagram right now, at Steph with 2 H's _LAU. And I have a broadcast channel there, which is where I'm posting all the cookbook club information.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Before we go, our guest is going to leave a voicemail just talking to themselves 10 years from now. You have reached the Future of Food is You mailbox. Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, Stephanie. How's it going? 40 and thriving, no doubt. Whatever path you've taken in life, I'm confident you've made the right decisions. By now, you probably have a house with a vegetable garden and a big dining table and that long-haired Dashin that you've always dreamed of. Maybe even a big bookshelf of cookbooks that you'll hopefully use. Either way, you're definitely eating well and surrounded by a community of people you cherish. I hope you still make time to explore your hobbies and creative pursuits, and that you continue to view the world with the same childish optimism and curiosity that you did when you were 30. Whatever you're up to these days, just remember to be gentle with yourself. Give yourself a pat on the back for everything that you've accomplished.
That's it for today's show. I would love for you to leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to our show. The Future of Food is You is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Thanks to the team at City Box Studios. executive producers Kerry Diamond and Catherine Baker, associate producers Jenna, Sadhu, and Elizabeth Vogt, and content operations manager Londyn Crenshaw. Catch you on the future flip.